One of the most dangerous kinds of control is the one that wears the mask of love. Unlike obvious domination, shouting, threats, or intimidation, this form seeps in quietly, wrapped in words that sound tender. It doesn't say, "Do this or else." It says, "I only want what's best for you." The first form of manipulation is when parents use guilt to control. Sometimes, the most powerful form of control isn't delivered through strict rules or punishments, but through guilt. Phrases like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Or, "I just want what's best for you," can sound caring on the surface, but underneath, they often carry a demand. "Obey me, or you're ungrateful." The subtlety is what makes this form of manipulation so heavy. Unlike outright abuse, it leaves no visible scars, only internalized shame and a sense of lifelong indebtedness. Children grow up believing that love must always be repaid, that their worth is tied to meeting expectations, and that their own desires are selfish. Instead of producing freedom, this kind of care produces adults who move through life burdened with invisible chains, struggling to say no, overcompensating to please others, or feeling guilty for pursuing their own happiness. Take, for example, Ludwig van Beethoven. Beethoven's childhood shows how this pattern can manifest in extreme ways. His father, Johann, was obsessed with molding him into the next Mozart. He forced the young Beethoven into endless hours of practice, often waking him up in the middle of the night to play, punishing mistakes with beatings and humiliation. The narrative was framed as "for your own good," a father helping his son achieve greatness. But in truth, it was about control and projection. Johann wanted recognition, wealth, and status through his son. For Beethoven, what was presented as love and guidance was in fact suffocating pressure, rooted in manipulation. Though Beethoven later became one of the greatest composers in history, he carried scars of this early conditioning: emotional volatility, mistrust in relationships, and a lifelong struggle with self-worth. His story shows how guilt and care, used as tools of control, can shape not just a childhood, but an entire life. For many children, this doesn't nurture confidence. It plants seeds of fear, shame, and lifelong pressure to please. They internalize the idea that love is conditional, dependent on performance and sacrifice. Michael Jackson's childhood is a powerful and tragic example of this dynamic. From a very young age, Michael was thrust into the spotlight under the strict management of his father, Joe Jackson. Rehearsals were grueling, mistakes were punished with harsh criticism, or worse, physical violence. Joe told his children it was all for their future, that this discipline was necessary to make them stars and secure a better life for the family. This was framed as care and sacrifice, a father guiding his children to success. But underneath, it was about control, perfectionism, and living through them. Michael, in particular, became the centerpiece of this dream, carrying the weight of both his father's ambitions and his family's survival. The cost was enormous. Though Michael achieved unprecedented fame and became the king of pop, he grew up with deep scars, lifelong struggles with self-image, emotional pain, and mistrust. He once admitted how terrified he was of disappointing his father, even as an adult. What looked like love and protection was, in truth, manipulation through guilt and fear. Michael was made to believe that all the pressure, all the control, was for his own good. In reality, it stripped him of the simple joys of childhood and left him wrestling with identity and worth for the rest of his life. Parental love is often expressed as guidance, but when guidance becomes relentless pressure, it stops being nurturing and starts being controlling. The words may sound loving: "I believe in you, I'm preparing you for greatness," but beneath them often lies expectation. "You must fulfill my vision, or you've failed me." Children raised under this pressure can grow into adults who are hyper-disciplined and successful, but also burdened with guilt, perfectionism, and the fear of never being enough. Tiger Woods is another example of this dynamic. From the moment Tiger Woods could hold a golf club, his father, Earl Woods, began grooming him to be extraordinary. Earl wasn't just pushing Tiger to be a great golfer, he declared his son would be a chosen one, destined to change the world. Training sessions were intense, filled with both encouragement and manipulation. Earl framed it as care. "I know what's best for you. I'm doing this to make you great." But underneath, much of it was about control and living through Tiger. Earl often used guilt and emotional weight to keep Tiger focused. Tiger later admitted that he felt a constant obligation to meet the expectations placed on him, as if failing wasn't just personal disappointment, it was betraying his father's vision and sacrifices. The results were undeniable. Tiger became one of the greatest golfers in history, revolutionizing the sport and dominating at a level the world had never seen. But the cost was equally immense. His adult life was marked by secrecy, internal conflict, and struggles with identity outside of golf. The very discipline that built his empire also left him emotionally guarded and burdened. What was presented as care and belief in his potential was, at its core, an all-consuming demand. Tiger's story shows how even well-meaning parental concern can become a subtle form of control, one that forges brilliance, but often at the expense of inner peace. The second form of manipulation is when a partner uses love as a weapon. In romantic relationships, the most powerful tool of control isn't always anger or violence, it's love itself. Or, more accurately, the illusion of love being conditional. Statements like, "If you really loved me, you would do this," turn affection into a bargaining chip. Silent treatment, emotional withdrawal, or jealousy framed as, "I just care too much," all serve as subtle leashes. The manipulator hides control behind intimacy, making resistance feel like betrayal. The victim begins to wonder, "Am I selfish? Do I not care enough?" Over time, this erodes self-trust. Love stops being a safe place of freedom and becomes a cage disguised as closeness. Whitney Houston's relationship with Bobby Brown wasn't simply a celebrity romance gone wrong. It was a textbook case of how love can be weaponized and turned into a chain. What made it so devastating was the way manipulation was hidden behind the language of affection. At first, Bobby's intensity looked like passion. He loved her fiercely, but that fierceness often crossed into possessiveness. His jealousy wasn't expressed as insecurity, but rebranded as proof of devotion. "I only act this way because I love you so much." What might have been controlling behavior in any other context was masked as protection, as if Whitney's safety and loyalty depended on him. This is a common psychological tactic in manipulative relationships. The abuser recasts domination as care, making resistance feel like ingratitude. For Whitney, who was already under immense pressure from fame, this dynamic was especially powerful. She was a woman constantly judged by the world, and Bobby's presence, though turbulent, gave her a sense of intimacy and loyalty she desperately craved. But in the process, her self-trust began to erode. Each confrontation or accusation of disloyalty forced her to prove her love again, trapping her in a cycle where devotion was constantly tested, never secure. You know what makes manipulation in relationships so cruel? It's the way it disguises itself. Someone will say, "I'm only jealous because I care," turning control into something that looks like love. Then they blur the boundaries, making you question yourself. Like if you ever think about leaving, somehow, you're the one being disloyal. And the worst part? They switch between chaos and comfort, breaking you down and then soothing you, until you start believing you can't even survive without them. Whitney's situation shows how even someone immensely talented, powerful, and adored can be ensnared by these tactics. Love, when distorted into a weapon, can convince even the strongest spirits that staying is an act of loyalty and leaving is abandonment. In her case, the emotional storm spilled into other struggles: addiction, public scrutiny, and the gradual draining of her once vibrant spirit. What the world saw as Whitney and Bobby was more than a marriage. It was a cycle of passion and pain, love and control, where manipulation wore the mask of devotion. Marilyn Monroe's life offers a quieter yet equally insidious lens into how love and care can be weaponized. Unlike the explosive turbulence of Whitney Houston's relationship, Marilyn's manipulation often wore the mask of refinement and guidance. Those around her, lovers, managers, studio executives, claimed to protect or guide her. But their protection was less about her well-being and more about control, controlling her image, her decisions, and ultimately her very identity. Psychologically, this is a classic form of subtle manipulation. When someone frames restriction as care, the victim begins to internalize the belief that giving up autonomy equals trust and love. Marilyn's partners often positioned themselves as gatekeepers to her safety and success, convincing her that surrendering her independence was an act of devotion. Even the Hollywood machine compounded this. Studios dictated the roles she could play, her appearance, and her public persona, masking exploitation as mentorship and support. For Marilyn, this meant her life became a constant balancing act between the expectations of those who claimed to care and her own desires for freedom and authenticity. The vulnerability that made her so magnetic also made her a target. Men in her life leveraged this, persuading her that her dependence on them was a sign of intimacy, that any resistance implied distrust or ingratitude. This dynamic created a deep psychological paradox. The very forces claiming to nurture her were also eroding her sense of self. The line between love, guidance, and control blurred. Marilyn's charm, openness, and need for connection became the very things others used to contain her. The result was a profound loneliness and a fractured sense of autonomy, even amidst fame and adoration. Her story illustrates a key truth about manipulative relationships. Care and control often arrive hand in hand, and the most subtle manipulations can be the hardest to recognize. For Marilyn Monroe, the world saw a glamorous icon. Behind the veil, she was negotiating love that demanded submission, disguised as devotion. The third form of manipulation is when friends envies and masquerade it as advice. Friendship is supposed to be a source of support, encouragement, and shared growth. Yet even here, manipulation can hide in plain sight. Sometimes advice isn't really advice. It's envy in disguise. Words like, "I don't think you should try that," "it's risky," or "don't get too big-headed" may sound protective, but they often carry a subtle agenda, to keep you from surpassing them, to temper your ambition, or to limit your potential. The danger is that it's hard to recognize. After all, friends are supposed to care. When concern is wrapped in fear or jealousy, it feels like guidance, not control. The recipient may second-guess their dreams, overestimate the risks, and slowly shrink their aspirations to fit the comfort of others. Oprah Winfrey has spoken about her early life, when those around her discouraged her ambitions under the guise of protection. People warned her, "Don't aim too high, you'll get hurt," or "That path isn't for someone like you." While it sounded like caution, it was often rooted in doubt and envy. If Oprah's potential intimidated others, advising her to limit herself allowed them to feel safer while trying to keep her small. Yet she persevered, turning what was meant to restrain her into motivation to reach heights no one expected. Elvis Presley's life also illustrates this dynamic. His so-called friends and, most significantly, his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, presented themselves as guides protecting his career. On the surface, Parker's advice was framed as care, to shield Elvis from bad decisions and manage his public image. But behind the facade, Parker was controlling Elvis's career for his own gain, manipulating contracts and restricting Elvis's freedom to make choices. What appeared to be friendly counsel was actually a cage disguised as guidance. Manipulation that wears the mask of care is uniquely dangerous because it erodes trust, not just in others, but in yourself. When the people you love make you feel guilty, small, or dependent. While insisting it's for your own good, you start to doubt your own instincts. Every decision, every desire, every act of independence becomes a potential betrayal. Self-doubt grows, and the line between genuine concern and control blurs. Yet there's another side to this story. Many of history's most brilliant figures, Beethoven, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, achieved greatness in part because of the relentless pressure, the hidden demands, and the guilt-laden care they endured. Beethoven might never have become a musical genius without his father's harsh insistence. Michael Jackson may never have reached iconic heights without the intense, controlling guidance of his father. Tiger Woods' extraordinary golfing success was forged under his father's unyielding expectations. This raises a difficult question. When the mask of care pushes someone to greatness, does it justify the manipulation? Does the end of extraordinary achievement make the emotional cost acceptable? Or is it still a form of harm? In short, care can be one of manipulation's most effective disguises. It cloaks control in warmth, guilt in protection, and restriction in concern. The very forces that can propel someone to greatness can also leave invisible scars, eroding trust, self-worth, and freedom. So friends, I will leave you with a question. When does pressure disguised as care cross the line into manipulation? Can the same force that creates brilliance also be considered abusive? Or is it sometimes necessary? Share your thoughts in the comments.